This video is brought to you by Patreon provider Robert.
Well, hello and welcome. A huge thank you to Patreon provider Robert for sending this in for review. This is my first time with an AERO mount of any sort, let alone their UltraLight. And right off the bat, I'm excited for this thing. First off, it's claimed to be super lightweight and fairly inexpensive. These are around 80 bucks, and I've seen them on a lot of builds. However, despite how many positive reviews I've heard on these things, I've also heard some horror stories about things falling apart, screws getting stripped, or rather, the actual aluminum base getting stripped, and people hitting into this losing their Zero. So, without further ado, let's get this beautiful box cracked open and see what it's all about. First off, there's all the information you are going to need to know. Made in the US, made out of 6061 T6 aluminum, which is standard across most mounts, and that's basically it. Once you crack this open, I'll actually put this off to the side, you see that we have this nice little styrofoam pouch and this absolutely beautiful mount. Oh, by the way, ho ho ho, I'm getting in the Christmas spirit, and getting my hands on something like this certainly gets me all jolly. Anyway, if you haven't seen the Swamp Fox cantilever mount or the Vortex cantilever mount, which dropped at the same time, literally a day before this, watch those, because for the price of those, you had one that was pretty good and one that was horrible, and they were very heavy. This thing's supposed to be super lightweight, and you know what? The only way to really put that to the test is not only put it on the scale, but also compare it to other mounts and rings to give you an idea of just how lightweight this is. About 3.5 ounces is ridiculously light. To give you another example of what another 30 millimeter set of rings are, these are, I believe, SWFA HD rings. They're nearly a full ounce and a half heavier, and these are already fairly light. Comparing it to that Swamp Fox cantilever mount, you're talking about almost 3 times the weight. So, this thing being an ultralight, they were not joking. This is as lightweight as you could possibly get. Now, that's phenomenal if you're only looking for maximum weight savings. But I want to see exactly where those people are coming from, where they're talking about possibly having these things get screwed up. But before we get to that, let's give this a good once-over. The anodizing feels really good. You could see a nail will scratch off on it fairly easily, but it rubs off and cleans up very nicely. It's not the smoothest, but it's not the roughest. It's really, really nice. They give us a pretty nice wide base over here for leveling scopes. Even though this is at a slight cant, it doesn't really matter, because all you need is a parallel surface and a parallel surface to level a scope fairly easily and efficiently with a caliper or a vernier. We have three blocks that are going to interlock with your 1913 rail, and you can get a sneak peek of where these 3 screws go, because it looks like they're right in line with those. We also got these 2 massive claws. They're about 4 inches on both sides, and that's going to be excellent for giving us good contact with our rail. So the claw for itself is extremely lightweight and can be flipped up or down, so there's no real side to it, which is excellent. We'll talk about the cap in just a second, but let us take a look at one of the potential problems I feel for this. As you can see, there are the 3 holes right here. No, there are no steel inserts, and the reason for that is just how thin of a wall there is between where the screws go on these threaded holes and these blocks. Typically, whenever you're machining something, you don't want to have anything with a hard edge, because that's where failure is going to happen. Not that I'm saying that recoil is going to shear this off or cause this to crack, but that is a possibility. But if you over torque these screws down, I could very easily see this getting deformed and stripping out. And over torquing it, I can absolutely understand, because typically for a cross bolt like this, you would torque these to about 30 to 40 inch-pounds, because as you could see, you have this big old beefy steel T-bolt right here, and it's made it up to a hard surface. So once you tighten this, this isn't going to be able to draw through, which is great. 40 inch-pounds all day long. Or you can have something like these Vortex precision rings, which I'm not going to pull them apart, but you have a lot larger surface where the screw goes into, so you have stronger threads. As a result, AERO recommends 15 inch-pounds on both the main base clamp and on the ring caps. And 15 inch-pounds is not a lot. If you do not have one of these, which if you don't have one of these, buy one of these. They're an absolute lifesaver. Link in the description. This is going to prevent you from causing damage to this. Anyway, the rings itself have a really nice little feature. They actually lock like so. And once you tighten up the bottom, it creates a little pressure up top, and you're good to go. However, I can see that even if you get this properly torqued down to only 15 inch-pounds, which is about right, there still might be a little bit of movement up here. And I don't know how I feel about that, especially if, like, God forbid, you drop your gun and you hit your scope or you hit this. It might deform it a little bit, and I'm not overly confident with that. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. But this is still a very lightweight mount and is beautifully machined. I don't see any even sort of chatter marks on the inside of this radius, which if you look at it, they probably machined it like this with a very long end mill. I highly doubt they wire EDM'd it, but you know, they might have. But it's just beautiful. But anyway, enough of this. Let me throw an optic in here. Let's see how well this resets to 0, and then we'll talk about our findings afterwards. All right, we got the AERO UltraLight and my SWFA 16X. As you can see, everything is properly torqued down on both the rings and the base. Now, I had already said it earlier in the video, and I know this video is long, so please bear with me. I'm trying to get a lot of information out there. The torque specs on this mount are for the rings and the base 15 inch-pounds. So, like I said earlier, there have been stories about people stripping these things, and I can absolutely see why. But nevertheless, this is a very low torque setting. So if you are using a standard size Torx tool that they send you, you can absolutely crank this down to way more than 15 inch-pounds almost instantly. Recommend blue Loctite and a torque wrench if you're going to set this thing up properly. Anyway, I'm going to loosen up the 3 screws on the side of the base, front, middle, and rear. You should see we have some movement going on. I'm going to put a little bit of forward pressure, snug up the middle first, then the front, then the rear, and then I'm going to torque the middle, front, and rear in that sequence 3 times. It's literally just a little bit more than snug. And we have about a 0.1 of a mil, I'm going to say, discrepancy. I'm going to leave it there, which isn't too bad. I bet if I was torquing this down a touch more, I feel we'd get a little bit more consistent results. 15 inch-pounds, like I said, just does not feel like a lot. We're loose. A little bit of forward pressure. I'm actually going to snug the middle without torquing it down. Because again, this is very, very close to just clicking this fat wrench. Let's see where we are. We are very consistent on that 0.1. Do it one more time for consistency's sake. All 3 are loose. Scope is loose, as you can see. Slight forward pressure. Snugging up the middle, the front, and the rear. And then we're going to go to torque the middle, the front, and the rear. And it looks like we split that difference going back towards our original 0. So all in all, not half bad. We're getting about a 0.1 of a mil shift at its worst so far that I've seen. I could do this 100 times and probably stay within those results. So all in all, not half bad. I just wish I could torque the base a little bit more. That's probably the weakest link on this thing right now. So there you have it. Despite the fact this is a permanently attached, or it should be a permanently attached mount, if you ever do take it off, as long as you torque it back properly, you won't have any issues as far as it holding a fairly good 0. But that's the problem. A lot of people online have reported that something has stripped out on this, or it doesn't hold 0 if they hit their scope or they drop their gun. And I can absolutely see why. It's a really nice idea for AERO to have this sort of, hook and loop and 2 screws in the bottom clamp. But there is still the possibility that you can get this to just move ever so slightly and cause a shift. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is the possibility that it can happen. Another serious possibility that we spoke about earlier is that you can very easily strip out the 3 threaded holes for these 3 torque screws for the side claw. And the reason is, I wasn't too sure of this until I double checked it on AERO's website. They recommend 15 inch-pounds for the clamshells, which is about standard. Typically, it's between 15 and 18 inch-pounds. A lot of Vortex optics will say do not torque more than 18 inch-pounds because they don't want you to collapse the tube. But typically on cross bolts, you can torque those up to like 30. Some people recommend 40 inch-pounds. Now, a lot of the videos that I do on my more permanently attached mounts, I torque them to 40 inch-pounds. If I were to torque these to 40 inch-pounds, it would strip the threads completely out. I can almost guarantee it. And that's a problem. And I think that's why other people are having problems with these mounts and claim that they're not holding up as well as they should. I feel if you torque this down to its proper setting, you would have no problems. And it doesn't take much. All it takes is something like this. You set it to about 15 inch-pounds, and you go until it clicks. And then you run the whole entire sequence over again, because you never want to just do one, because it might settle and it might just put a little bit more pressure on another screw. So center and then out, and then center and then out again, you should be fine. For the price, this thing's about 80 bucks or so. I think it's a phenomenal mount. I would, however, love to see, instead of a ultralight version, maybe a light or like a mid-weight version. Something that was a little bit more robust. Something that had the 3 screws over here, maybe up above these 3 locks for the pick rail. So this way you could put a little bit more tension on them and not have to worry about stripping them out. But keeping them out mostly similar to that, but adding 2 more screws on top for each ring. You wouldn't be adding that much weight, and I think you'd make a much more robust mount in the process. You could even keep the price around 100 bucks and have something that I feel would probably be one of the best bangs for your buck out there for a permanent solution mount that, even if you added an extra 2 ounces, would still be under 6 ounces. Is AERO going to do that? I'm not really too sure. So this is what we have. Anyway, that's all for this review. I want to thank Rob again for sending this in. I'm very happy to finally get my hands on an AERO mount. They can be delicate. Follow the manufacturer recommended torque settings and leave it alone. You shouldn't have any problems. Anyway, with that, thank you very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time, and have a Merry Christmas.
And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.